Secretary Kissinger, Minister Schäuble, Professor Summers, ministers, excellencies, members of parliaments, friends, supporters, and dear colleagues of the American Academy in Berlin, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a very warm welcome to the 2017 Henry A. Kissinger Prize ceremony. As president of the American Academy in Berlin, I have the singular honor of welcoming you to this especially meaningful occasion. Thank you all for being with us tonight. On this festive evening, our thoughts go first to the man who stands at the foundation of everything it stands for, the recipient of the Henry Kissinger Prize in 2011, Bundeskanzler Helmut Kohl. It goes without saying that we have lost a great man, a historic personality, an internationalist, a transatlanticist, a key friend of the American Academy. At the 2011 Kissinger Prize ceremony, laudations for Chancellor Kohl were delivered by several figures, including United States President Bill Clinton. In the interest of paying homage both to Chancellor Kohl and also to tonight's Kissinger Prize recipient, I would like to read a brief excerpt from President Clinton's 2011 laudation. Clinton said, and I quote, "I can't tell you how many times I knew what the right thing to do was because of what he had already done. All I had to do was to follow Helmut Kohl's lead. Helmut Kohl has been a wonderful friend to America, but most of all, he was a friend to the people who put him in office, to the German people, and to young Germans who have been born since he left office and may not even know who he is. I ask those of you here never to allow anyone to take for granted the fact that at a pivotal moment in the history of Europe and the history of the world, Germany was called upon, and by good fortune and good judgment, a man who was big in more than physical stature answered that call. Never take that for granted and never squander that legacy," unquote. As this legacy looms over us, it is by no means lost upon us that Minister Schäuble was at Chancellor Kohl's side through this historic change. 11 years after joining the youth division of the CDU in 1961, Mr. Schäuble became a member of the Bundestag in 1972. In 1984, he was appointed Minister of Federal Affairs in Chancellor Kohl's government and was charged with organizing an especially weighty event, the first official state visit by Erich Honecker. As the chief negotiator of the treaty uniting East and West Germany in 1990, it was Dr. Schäuble who laid pen to paper as Minister of the Interior, officially rejoining the country after 4 decades of political separation. Minister Schäuble was also, poignantly, as we celebrate him in this city tonight, one of the most vocal members of the Parliament in 1991 to argue for the movement of the German capital back to Berlin. Throughout his career, Dr. Schäuble has accompanied all major steps of European integration. Long committed to advancing European stability and growth, he has acted boldly and with principle as both Minister of the Interior and Minister of Finance under Chancellor Merkel. As a committed transatlanticist, he has consistently urged partners to pursue sustainable solutions to global challenges, from immigration and data protection to financial regulation and international security. Through all of this, he has become one of the transatlantic community's most indispensable figures, standing for and advancing the values of liberal democracy. Several people this evening will address and celebrate Dr. Schäuble's achievements. Dr. Kissinger will speak first, followed by the laudation by Professor Lawrence Summers. Academy Chairman Gail Burt will read the citation and award the prize, and then Minister Schäuble will offer us his remarks. At the conclusion of the ceremony, we hope you will all join us at a reception in the Hans Arnhold Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podium a person who was instrumental in helping the American Academy take wing, a man whose presence with us always reaffirms our sense of identity and our sense of purpose, Dr. Henry Kissinger.
Minister Schäuble, distinguished guests, before I begin my remarks, I would like to say a few words about Helmut Kohl, who was my friend and whom I had occasion to observe for many decades. I have spoken to the dinner guests before, and I would just like to summarize my reflections. Helmut Kohl played a decisive role in the relations between America and the United States. He played an indispensable role in the unification of Germany. He helped bring about the unification of Europe. He did all of this in a democratic country by building a consensus in his own country and among his allies. Others will have covered the specific achievements. I'd like to stress a few aspects with which I became especially familiar. I have said elsewhere that the study of how to deal with American presidents will someday be taught at universities in this country, which is so obsessed with that problem. They can learn from Helmut Kohl. His method was to become so much part of the personal life of those he dealt with that the question of whether there could be separate American and German interests never arose. He made himself part of the Americans that he dealt with. And when the Kissinger Prize was awarded to him, I mentioned it to Bill Clinton at some social occasion, and though he hadn't been invited to the event, he said, "I'll go with you." And when Jim Baker was given the Kissinger Prize, and I told him about it, he said, "I'll come, but only if there's an opportunity to visit Helmut Kohl." And I too had that feeling, because here were two countries that had undergone enormous differences and observed enormous suffering. And it was Helmut Kohl's skill to transform the political necessities of Germany into human imperatives. This was the first level of his contribution. And the second was that when the wall fell and many opinions were expressed on how to proceed and with what gradations and what nuances, Helmut Kohl understood that historical opportunities are unique events, and they require action that can be translated into an evolution. And he seized the moment by pronouncing the 10 principles of German unification at a moment when the prospects of unification were still not self-evident. And I know from my peripheral participation in American high-level discussions of the time that many nuances were being considered and many concerns explored when Helmut Kohl came and spent a weekend with our president at Camp David. And after that, the direction of the policy was established. And the extraordinary historic event occurred of a unification that was brought about by legal methods and by discussion between the two German entities, with the approval of allies, many of which had severe reservations in the face of an adversary whose self-interest in a unified Germany was not self-evident, and that all of this could be done while maintaining membership in NATO, and then to follow it with the unification or the unification of Europe and the establishment of a common currency. So we have to remember the vision of Helmut Kohl beyond the tactics of the moment that, as in every political career, depend on circumstances that cannot be necessarily predicted. So I wanted to leave this thought about Helmut Kohl. I saw him quite frequently, and visited him many times in his later years. And therefore, those of you who were present on the occasion that he received the Kissinger Prize should remember what an extraordinary event this was in his life, to return to Berlin with the assembled notables of the Federal Republic, an American president who had come across the Atlantic for that occasion. And so this Hulk of a man brought himself into a condition where from a wheelchair he spoke for 20 minutes. I confess I was so moved by the extraordinary physical effort that this represented and the difficulty I had to follow what he was saying, that I never read the text until recently. And I would urge you all to read it in German, because it is beautifully expressed and of a man who does not quarrel with his destiny, and as in warning and as a suggestion to the German people. And I'll just read one paragraph. It is true that we have many problems, yet we have achieved a future that is truly viable in the best sense of that word. Let us say yes to this life. After all that happened, we, the Germans, want to say yes to our future. We have understood that our future cannot only signify a German future, but must always be a common future shared with others, with neighbors, with our neighbors in the European community and within the Atlantic. So this was the spirit that those of us whose lives he touched were affected by, and why we consider this a very moving occasion, and why it is appropriate that a few words precede the awarding of this prize to Wolfgang Schäuble, who has helped complete many of the efforts that were begun then, and whose wisdom and skill have enabled us to proceed on a road which was a dream when it was first undertaken. And so we are here because we respect his vision and his courage and his integrity. When I drafted my remarks, it was before I knew that it would stand in the shadow of such a major event. But I want to say how appropriate I think it is that the award, just particularly this year, despite the fluctuations of life, has gone to Wolfgang Schäuble. Now, it is you should remember that these remarks were drafted before the event to which I just referred. But I thought it might be appropriate if I added a few personal comments to explain why I'm personally so pleased with this award. In the United States, commentators often invoke my German birthplace to explain the foreign policy in which I was involved, as if as a child I had read Bismarck by candlelight. They are not well informed about the educational priorities of Bavaria, where my childhood took place and where the Main River was still a kind of tacit frontier. But they're right in their implication that for me, Germany can never be an entirely foreign entity, and that therefore the drama of the last decades is something that occupied not only my personal political attention, but a kind of extension of my life. One of the bonds that I have with Wolfgang Schäuble is that we are both extremely interested in football. And the fact that, in fact, I followed the fate of Spielvereinigung Fürth, despite the fact that I have not lived in Fürth for 79 years. But it obliges me to point out that Spielvereinigung Fürth won the German national championship several times before Bayern München ever qualified itself, which is Mr. Schäuble. The fact that I don't permit the American Academy to stroll too far from this subject, it's shown by the fact that one evening at a dinner meeting of the directors of this institution, Richard von Weizsäcker and I fell into a discussion about the fact that we were both chairman or honorary chairman, but that the rank between us had not been established. So von Weizsäcker solved the problem in his extraordinary diplomatic manner by saying the rank should be established by the relative position of the two football clubs that we favor, that is Spielvereinigung Fürth and Hertha BSC Berlin. It was the only time in history and in recent memory that Spielvereinigung Fürth had a higher rank than Hertha BSC. So for 1 year, I outranked my admired friend Richard von Weizsäcker in the hierarchy of the American Academy. But so let me turn to subjects of this evening. Wolfgang Schäuble has, in the last period of European and German history, had the extraordinary task of dealing with evolutions that culminated in Europe, but that have developed all over the world. When Germany achieved a degree of sovereignty, the German economy was catastrophic. The German international position was one of isolation. And the participation of Germany in global affairs was unimaginable. In that period, Germany transformed itself, first in the Wirtschaftswunder, then into an equal participant in NATO, then into a participant in various economic institutions which grew out of these efforts, and then into a global power. In that process, the international economic system became global. But the dilemma was that the political system remained based on the nation state. The economic model strove for comparative advantage, and in the event sought to ignore, or at least overcome, national frontiers. In the political world, those who felt disadvantaged tried to use their political system by advocating solutions which obstruct or reverse the operation of the global system. Europe found itself as an institution suspended between its past and its futures. Its institutions are based on the European idea. The political divisions are dominated by domestic considerations. Within many nations, the national, potentially populist element is gaining ground. And the international system has to deal with the fact that what we call the rules-based system is really a European idea that developed in the aftermath of the Westphalian peace of 300 years ago, and that was spread around the world by colonialism. It was not, however, accepted in the same sense by many of the nations and regions that are practicing it. So, as a result, one sees around the world several different phenomena occurring simultaneously. Consolidation, as in Asia, attempted adaptation, as in Europe, disintegration, as in the Middle East, and a groping for some form, as in other regions of the world. All are linked by instantaneous communication system, and every region's actions can affect global conditions, but in a way that cannot be symmetrically calculated within each region. This is the fundamental challenge of the international system of our time. Within these systems, the challenge to Germany has been unique, from becoming an object of relief measures at the beginning. It is now in the position within Europe, at least, of the strongest economic country. And it is in a position to have to deal with the fundamental issue of the modern economy, which is to what degree one should emphasize consumption and to what degree one should respect the claims of the future. One cannot do both simultaneously to the full extent. And in that respect, Wolfgang Schäuble had been in an extraordinarily leading position. He defends the claims of the future by our insisting on a systematic approach in the present. And this is not always compatible with the short-term necessities of the political system. Wolfgang Schäuble has been one of the leaders who give us hope and the means to find a way through these perplexities. As finance minister of the economically strongest European country, he is obliged to deal daily with the manifestations of instabilities. But he also has a responsibility for transforming these instabilities into creating acts. Having grown up in wartime Germany and its chaotic aftermath, he has experienced the need for stability, but he has also had to participate in efforts for international responsibility. As a national leader for 3 decades, he has contributed his wisdom, perspective, and decisiveness to his country, to his continent, and the world. He has done that with a personal warmth that his reserved nature tries to obscure, but does never succeeds in obscuring. And so he has achieved the extraordinary position that while trying to bring about a limitation of political preferences, he has been able to recall Europe and its other friendships to its duties. I particularly want to stress his commitment to the Atlantic Partnership, which is one of the reasons for the creation of this prize. He has been steadfast in overcoming the inevitable disputes between entities that are themselves in a process of transition, and to act as a kind of conscience to all of us in these efforts. For me, no visit to Germany is complete without a conversation with Wolfgang Schäuble. We are all grateful for his role in merging the national with the European imperatives and European temptations with Atlantic perspectives. It is therefore a great honor to be present at this ceremony for a prize that links my name with Wolfgang Schäuble's. Thank you very much.
Wow. I do not scare easy, but it is a bit daunting to be here tonight. As Henry Kissinger became the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States, I entered 9th grade. As Wolfgang Schäuble entered the Bundestag, I entered college. Henry, you are the greatest example our era has seen of how an engaged thinker can make the world a better place. There are few half your age who can match your curiosity, your wit, your energy, or commitment. You inspire us all. A prize named in your honor, presented annually at the American Academy in Berlin, is, I believe, an important tradition. For it reaffirms that if the history of the last 70 years has been profoundly different than that of the preceding 50, the reason has much to do with the mutual trust and reliance that has characterized the relationship between the United States and Germany. I should say here at the American Academy that as I prepared my remarks, I felt a real pang that I could not reach out for advice to my good friend Richard Holbrooke, who did so much to create this wonderful institution. Most of all, I'm honored to be part of celebrating Wolfgang Schäuble, a man whose efforts over so long a period, whose enduring values, and whose character have contributed so much. We are days past the 70th anniversary of the announcement of the Marshall Plan. Henry describes in his latest book, President Truman describing the Marshall Plan to him as the American act of which he was most proud. Rightly so. But as has been demonstrated by the many failed Marshall Plans of the last half century, the success of aid depends much more on the determination and commitment of the recipient than it does on the generosity of the donor. What Germany has accomplished and what it has become over the last 70 years is one of history's most positive stories. And it is embedded and central to the remarkable success of the transatlantic community. If today we are at a moment of some flux and, yes, uncertainty in relations between the United States and Germany, in charting Europe's course, in the future of the transatlantic alliance, it behooves us to remember, as Wolfgang surely does, that the past has not been a steady march from darkness into light. The 10th anniversary of the Marshall Plan came in the wake of Suez. The 20th with students in the streets over Vietnam and Russian tanks in Prague. The 60th with sharp divisions over Iraq, to take just a few examples. Even in the face, though, of challenges in my own country that I do not welcome, I am optimistic that with the kind of indomitable spirit that Wolfgang brings to everything he does, the challenges of the moment will be met. Indeed, the political situation in continental Europe today has more seeds of hope than seemed plausible just a few months ago. And the kind of adversity represented by new gulfs between continental Europe and the English-speaking world contain within them an opportunity for European renewal. As Wolfgang has said, crises can foster change. Things can happen very fast in time of crisis. That is why I am not so pessimistic regarding crises. Several weeks ago, two of President Trump's most thoughtful advisors took to the op-ed pages to assert, quoting, "The world is not a global community, but an arena where nations, non-governmental actors, and businesses engage and compete for advantage." Wolfgang Schäuble is not dewy-eyed, overly sentimental, or soft. And yet I do not believe that he could ever have written such a sentence. Indeed, his life's work is a testament to the power and the efficacy of fostering community. Wolfgang played a key role, as Henry detailed, in the unification of Germany. He, like the late Chancellor Kohl, understood how important generous support for the East was in creating a new and strong nation. That sometimes monetary mechanics have to be subordinate to political purpose. I cannot think of a speech in the U.S. Congress that is regarded as having changed the outcome of an important debate. Yet as I sought the advice of my German friends as to what to remark on tonight, more than one asserted with great confidence, but that but for Wolfgang Schäuble's speech in the Bundestag, this gathering would not be taking place in Berlin. Wolfgang may be the last of the dwindling band of committed Europeanists who hold power today and held power when the Berlin Wall fell a generation ago. No one in office today has understood longer or better the importance of the partnership between Germany and France, a point that was brought home to me when he and I chatted over dinner about his frequent dialogues with Francois Mitterrand in support of President Mitterrand and Chancellor Kohl's historic importance. Yes, Wolfgang has strong views on what might be called national responsibility as a precondition for the success of European Union. But he has always stood for deeper and for stronger union. He was right when he wrote some time ago that European Union is the best political idea of the 20th century. He has been a key driver of the convergence in rules and policies that has been central to monetary union. And yet, he has been willing to recognize at the moments of maximum danger that a common central bank has to be able to do what is necessary to maintain financial and economic stability. Wolfgang has also recognized at moments when it has not been easy, Germany's obligations to global community. There has been no stronger German advocate for meeting the obligations of history towards Jewish populations, no one more open to Islamic refugees, no one more committed, even before the events of the last months, to strengthening Europe's common capacity for common defense. Indeed, I am told that austere he may be, but that as finance minister, he has never rejected a request for spending on refugees or on common defense. Wolfgang, in eulogizing Chancellor Kohl several days ago, remarked on how, when in the harried fall of 1989, it fell to President Bush to respond quickly to Germany's 10-point reunification plan. The president did not wait for his machinery and apparatus to ponder the details, but said simply, "We trust the Chancellor." I recall Henry's once telling me a similar story about President de Gaulle's response to an emissary sent by President Kennedy with photographic evidence during the Cuban Missile Crisis. History may be, to some extent, shaped by tectonic forces beyond the control of any political figure. But at key juncture, personality matters, and trust between persons matters. I have known many who disagree with Wolfgang Schäuble, sometimes on matters that are quite fundamental. But I have never known anyone who has found him anything other than totally decent and utterly straightforward. He possesses a remarkable combination of determined adherence to principle with openness to all perspectives. It's no secret, as I'll indicate in just a minute, that he and I have not seen in completely parallel matters relating to the importance of Keynes' insights on demand management policy for current European dilemmas. But he has always been open to friendly discussion. And indeed, I was so impressed that after 25 years of G7 finance ministers widening their circle to include their deputies and G7 central bankers, it was Wolfgang Schäuble who took the initiative for the first time to bring in a roster of outside economic thinkers, many of whom, indeed most of whom, did not share his precise perspective on the matters at issue. If I find myself in full agreement with Wolfgang on matters of politics and matters of international relations, and an enormous admirer of his character, I would be disingenuous if I did not take some note of our different perspectives on matters of economics. These differences are not as large as many might suppose, and certainly are not personal, but I believe are instead rooted in differences between German and Anglo-American economic traditions, each of which have their great strength. The German tradition emphasizes rightly that the dials of fiscal and monetary policy, no matter how brilliantly fiddled, cannot produce enduring full employment with prosperity. Competitiveness and economic success for any nation depend ultimately on the skills of its workers, the ingenuity and efficacy of its companies, and the quality of its institutions. Here, the world has much to learn from modern Germany, especially its success in helping all young people make the all-important transition from school to work. When Germans attribute their success to deep and difficult reform, I believe they are correct. When Shakespeare said that fault lies not in our stars, but in ourselves, he could have been speaking of nations with struggling economy. Foreigners who suggest that Germany prospers because it exploits the global system for its own benefit to the detriment of others are more wrong than right. At the same time, the Anglo-American tradition of economic thinking carries with it important lessons as well. There's a reason why, in the long history of nations, common money across several nations, in the manner of European monetary union, is almost without precedent. For its management requires enormous statesmanship in skill. For with monetary union across diverse nations, there is neither the federal response to local shocks characteristic of the United States, nor the option of currency adjustment usually present for sovereign nations. The challenge is that on the one hand, convergence is a necessary condition for success, that when all can draw on a common pool of credibility, discipline is essential if that pool is not to be dissipated. On the other hand, it is essential, and this is perhaps a key Anglo-American insight, to recognize that individual virtue multiplied many times over need not always translate into collective success. One who stands up at a football game sees better. If all stand, no one's view is improved. In the same way, selling requires buying. Not every nation can enjoy export-led growth, and communal prosperity requires mutual adjustment. Successfully striking this balance is the challenge, the continuing challenge, of European financial diplomacy. So far, things have worked out. With German leadership, a flexible and pragmatic ECB, willing to do whatever it takes to preserve monetary union, and much negotiation. We can be grateful for the progress that has been made and for the recent encouraging economic statistics, even as we recognize that there is much left to do. Some would see it as an irony of Wolfgang's career that a man of such steadfast principle has been a politician of such extraordinary staying power. I suppose so, but virtue is sometimes rewarded. For his public service, Wolfgang has suffered more than almost anyone. And yet, he perseveres with purpose and determination, but without bitterness or anger. For him, it's always about the issue, not the self. The real irony is that the most apolitical of politicians has been the most enduring. Wolfgang has said that I've been a politician long enough to know that every year will find us living in a situation that one couldn't have imagined a year previously. Sometimes it's better than we imagined. Sometimes it's not as good. We could not have imagined a year ago where we are today. And we cannot know the future. Events are contingent, tactics and strategies subject to constant evolution, yet values are enduring. I believe that with Wolfgang, the community is an enduring value in international affairs. I expect that with steps forward and yes, steps backward, that will be the enduring view on both sides of the Atlantic. And I recognize, as I suspect Wolfgang does, that with recent political developments here, with challenges in my country, with economic strengthening, this has the potential to be Europe's hour. If Wolfgang's values can guide all of us forward, there will be much to celebrate at the 80th anniversary and indeed at the 100th anniversary of the Marshall Plan. I am honored to have been here tonight to congratulate Wolfgang Schäuble on the Henry Kissinger Prize.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Henry A. Kissinger Prize is awarded annually to a renowned figure in the field of international diplomacy. Tonight, the American Academy in Berlin honors Minister Wolfgang Schäuble for his outstanding achievements through nearly 5 decades of public service. His contributions to contemporary German politics have guided the nation through unification, advanced the European idea, and vigorously promoted the European-American partnership. His principled leadership in the German federal government and parliament has earned him esteem across party lines. And his intellectual rigor and moral integrity have helped to define the contours of the German character on the world stage. As Minister of the Interior in 1990, Minister Schäuble was the chief negotiator and signatory of the treaty uniting East and West Germany. Since the Single European Act in 1986, he has accompanied all major steps of European integration and has continued to do so throughout the European debt crisis. Long committed to advancing European stability and growth, he was undeterred by critics of his economic reforms, which have, in the end, spurred increased economic activity in the Eurozone and further solidified European unity. As a committed transatlanticist, Minister Schäuble has consistently urged partners to pursue sustainable solutions to global challenges, from immigration and data protection to financial regulation and international security. Throughout, he has personified the spirit of the indefatigable statesman whose dedication to the promotion of human dignity, belief in the rule of law, and evaluation of public debate has exemplified the values of the liberal democratic tradition. In doing so, he has become one of the transatlantic community's most indispensable figures. For these reasons, Minister Schäuble, on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the American Academy in Berlin, it is with great pleasure that we present to you the Henry A. Kissinger Prize.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I have to say it's really a very emotional event for me this evening, and all of us had been said in these wonderful speeches. And of course, to receive this prize, which is named to, I always quote you, Sir Henry Kissinger, is a really unbelievable honor for me. And listening to the wonderful speech you gave, Larry Summers, has also been very, very touching. By the way, since you mentioned my age, I carefully studied all these important personalities which received this prize, and I have to say I'm the youngest one. But it's true. There is Summers and myself, and he's a famous economist, and I'm famously not an economist, with all due respect. Therefore, we have not always been the same opinion, but it's always not only interesting to discuss, but it's also, I can always learn. And that was the reason I invited, because if I only listen to my own opinion, I don't get new ideas. If I listen to other people, it's much better. And you have wonderfully described the difficult way of thinking between, let's say, traditional Anglo-Saxon economists and traditional European, especially German economists. Sometimes I am saying it's a pity that the German word Ordnungspolitik, there is no English translation. There's no English translation, whatever this means. And but nevertheless, we have this difficult construction of the monetary union in the European Union. And before we started, in the late 80s, by the way, before the Berlin Wall came down, and it was Jacques Delors who was the first one who took the initiative. And of course, it was a discussion whether it should be wise to build a monetary union without a political union. Because all economists told us that it will not work. A monetary union without a common fiscal and economic policy will not be sustainable. But this is the only way in which European integration moved away from the very beginning. We started, by the way, I have to remember, in the early 50s with the political union, the so-called common defense union. It failed because it was too early for, let's say, our French friends and neighbors, 9 years after World War II, to agree to a common military force with Germany. It was impossible. Therefore, it failed, And then we said, okay, we will try to integrate Europe in the ways that we make any possible integration step, and the needed others we cannot join now, they will follow later. In times of crisis, by the way, I'm almost convinced that Europe moves in time of crisis. Therefore, I am not threatened by crisis. Crises are opportunities, and we will move on in this. And in some way, we did successfully. And when we started with the monetary union, we said, okay, let's try. And now we have seen it will be difficult, and the question is not answered. I hope we will have a new window of opportunity after French election, and a new spirit of a wind of change. And I think even in Germany we are waiting and thinking about. By the way, we have always to have in mind what is slightly forgotten in western part of Europe, that we have not only to overcome some differences between the southern part of Europe and the northern part of Europe, we have not to forget that there has been an eastern part and a western part. And I have said 2 days ago, or 3 days ago, in the meeting of the European finance ministers, that it is not to be acceptable that we don't have in mind that one of the biggest success of European reunification is reunification of Europe as a whole. We overcome not only Germany's division, but the division of Europe. And we should avoid to fall back. Therefore, it's even more complex, but we will do it we will continue to do it. And I think we have new opportunities and new challenges as well. I will not discuss broadly the problems of European integration, but I can tell you I'm thankful for even your different opinion, and we will continue, I hope, to continue to discuss and to learn and to path a common way, which is, by the way, when you said for the success of a Marshall Plan, the readiness of the receivers is even more decisive than the generosity of the donators. Then that me reminds why we have German presidency of the G20 have taken a compact with Africa on the agenda of the G20. We will fail with another series of 8 programs for Africa if we cannot deliver, if the preconditions for private investments in Africa. And that is the reason what we have offered this compact with Africa, to help the African countries to create the preconditions that investments count, and there will be a return on investment. And in some similarity, it's also with the European assistance programs. I knew it in advance that it would not be popular. And I knew it in advance because I know politics very well. Any government is always saying, oh, we have to do something which is not liked in the population on behalf of other people. Let's say Brussels, but Brussels is too abstract, so you take the German government, and since our federal chancellor is so nice, you take the finance minister. That is quite easy, but it's not the real problem. So we must and it is really true. The readiness of the receiver is a precondition for the success of any. And then I am always working in Germany. I'm always working for generosity, because any generosity or any European solidarity is in the best interest of Germany and Germany's future. We are not so generous because our future depends on the success of Europe. Otherwise, we will have no future. And it's not. Some months ago, Fritz Stern passed, and he said he made the word of Germany's second chance in history. And the second chance of Germany after World War II would not have offered to Germany without European integration and without transatlantic partnership. And that was the way back for for Germany after the disaster of World War II and all these terrible things in the first half of last century that made us, paved the way for us to be so successful. And therefore, I will never forget, and for this I will remain a very convinced supporter of transatlantic alliance. And with all the respect, with all the problems we actually have United States remain an indispensable nation. And without a strong United States, it's impossible. Of course, Europe has to take much more responsibilities. By the way, it's not new. I remember, I'm a young man, therefore I only remember John F. Kennedy and President not long before. But even John F. Kennedy asked for a fairer burdenship in the Atlantic Alliance. Therefore, it's not really new. And it's right. We have to stick up. We have to take more burdenship. And we will move step by step in that direction. I think it's really important that we will know in Germany and in Europe our responsibility not only for our own future, because the stability of a globalized world is a precondition of the success of any nation state and any continent and any nation state, as I just said. And therefore, I think we should continue, even in difficult times, to stand together, to know we have these common values. It's not. Who else stands for human rights, for the rule of law, for the separation of powers, for representative democracy, for social stability and environment sustainability? And the West is inconceivable without these values and principles. And these values connect us together. And by the way, I am absolutely not skeptic. If you look all around the world, why do dictators all over the world are so nervous if they are confronted with some wind of change and they know the Western values enjoy high attractiveness all over the world. And therefore, the only thing we have to do is that we stick to our values a little bit more. And the more we are convincing, the more I'm convinced that we will overcome given problems, difficulties, and that we will have a good way to find a way to make this global world stable. But I have to underline, only if we take a multilateral approach, we do have any chance of solving the major problems in the world. And there are many. And the combination between digitalization, this disruption in technologies, which changes not our economy, our societies, our political systems, our communication, and the globalization, which is closely linked to this. This is the ongoing challenge for all of us, and no one in the years and decades to come will live in a stable world if we fail to stabilize these problems. To name someone, climate change. I think it's not wrong that there is a climate change, with all due respect. Energy security, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, international terrorism. Not surprising that other societies and countries and regions use the weapons in which they are much more successful than the highly civilized societies in Europe and in North America. And the growing competition between powers and regions, crisis across the Arab world, the Islamist war against Western modernity. By the way, it was one of the reasons I created the German Islam Conference when I have been Minister of Interior, because I think we must not give up, even with all the problems, to pave ways that even Muslims and Muslim religion will fit to the modern world and the rules of modern democracy and society. Otherwise, we will suffer terrible years to come. And the refugee flows 2 years ago has reminded us, and it should remind all of us all over the world, that we have to care on the poverty and the genocide in parts of Africa, because Africa will be not only the problem of Europe if we fail in stabilizing Africa in the years and decades to come. So, altogether, we have to work to improve our cooperation. We have to rely on mutual trust. And I think if there are some difficulties timely, we should not give up. We all in Germany know what and in Europe we know what we think. Trustful and trusted relations with the United States, and therefore, and I have grown up in my lifetime. I have been born in 1942, and my memory started when we have been protected already by our European allies, but of course in the first round by the Americans, and therefore we will continue to be ready to work together to build a stronger Europe, that US get a better partner, and then in this global world we can make the world stable in good cooperation between both of us. And I think the United States should not take a too skeptical view of its role as a guardian of global order. We have already seen this in the recent years. Of course, it's okay to call action from the Europeans, including Germany, but we may have to do it together, and we know without the stabilizing role of American order in some regard, it will be difficult to make the years to come better. And I doubt whether the United States truly believes that the world order would be equally sound if China or Russia were to fill the gaps left by the US. And if China and Russia were simply given a free hand to dominate the spheres of influence that they have defined for themselves. That would be the end of our liberal world order. And I am convinced this order is still the best of all possible worlds for ethical, for political, and for economic reasons. And we want this order to keep moving forward, or at least not see it weakened. After all, it's surely in the United States' own interest to ensure security and economic stability in its markets, both in Europe and around the world. And this is a basic precondition if the US wants to increase its exports and cut its trade deficit. Looking out for good deals for one's own country is completely legitimate. However, experience shows that the best deal for one's own country is ultimately the deal that also benefits other parties. There is no zero-sum game. A good deal is a mutually beneficial deal. Otherwise, it's not a good deal. Sorry to say it. In 1946, the US Secretary of State James F. Burns gave his famous speech of hope in Stuttgart. I was just 3 years old. I didn't really listen. I didn't understand English. But I read it later on, and I'm living nearby in the small hometown of a small city in the Black Forest. And in this speech, Burns said, "We have learned, whether we like it or not, that we live in one world, from which world we cannot isolate ourselves." Thank you very much for all you have done and for this wonderful honor for me.